Ethanol supporters are again stepping up to defend the here and now and the future of the renewable fuel. There's a new case that will determine if EPA can effectively end the use of liquid fuel engines. We'll get to the bottom of that. And sometimes the machine repeat stories around the stories are just too good to ignore. Wait until you hear this.
Live from the dawn of a fresh week via Farm Journal Studios, this is AgriTalk. This morning we kick off the week with Machinery Pete, Greg Peterson. But it's Geoff Cooper from the Renewable Fuels Association. Directly following the news, Brett Waltz from BAM WX. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson. And now, welcome the host of AgriTalk, Chip Lorre.
All right, Davis. Hey, thank you so much. I just need to say this real quickly.
All right.
Greg Peterson is not live this morning. We had the conversation with him Friday afternoon. It's a great conversation.
Oh, spoiler alert.
It is very interesting, some of the stories and some of the people that Greg meets when he's out on the road. And Greg was in Canada last week, and I don't know what the deal is, but every time he comes home from Canada, I think he comes home with an even better story. Now, if that's going to happen the next time he goes, I can't wait.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
We should try and set up the conditions. I mean, because they do like French fries with cheese and gravy and stuff on them. Is that poutine? Right. Is that what they call it? Yes. Maybe that's the secret. That might be.
It could be.
My superfood is pork. Maybe pizza's poutine.
That could very well be the case. That, and they love to keep their equipment just spotless.
Well, that might be it too.
That could be part of it as well. That's my experience with Canada anyway. I don't know. Yeah. Welcome to AgriTalk. I'm Chip. That is Davis.
Hello, everyone.
Dude, there's some spots in the northern Midwest that are seeing some weather, some storms here this morning, but the weekend was just full of them.
That's what I hear.
I witnessed 3 personally, that it was just like crazy amounts of rain in short periods of time. And we've got high river levels. We're trying to get everything under control. And unfortunately, it sounds like we might be in for some more later today. We'll talk with Brett about that. Yeah, let's talk to Brett about that in a moment. All right, buddy, let's get to it.
Well, I'm going to start with just some highlights from the National Weather Service weather outlook. An ongoing heat wave will continue today and tomorrow for much of the Great Plains to the lower Mississippi River Valley and into northern Florida. Dangerous heat is expected in Southern California and Puerto Rico. Scattered severe thunderstorms will be possible over parts of the upper Midwest today, with destructive wind gusts possible for part of Minnesota and into Wisconsin. Flooding resulted in some areas of the western and northern Corn Belt over the weekend due to excessive rains. Here in KC, Chip, I was playing a gig Saturday night. We got the windows wet, and that was about it. It was actually quite a lovely scene. Yeah,
some of the southern areas are turning very dry right now. So, and by that, when I say southern, I mean southern Corn Belt areas are turning very dry. We'll talk about that with Brett coming up here in a moment, too.
Well, Chip, private exporters reported sales of 228,000 metric tons of soybean, cake, and meal for delivery to the Philippines during the 24-25 marketing year. Good to see the Philippines picking up some cake here.
Well, and soybean meal, it's bargain buying. When you're, the August contract is just under $350 here this morning. That's a pretty good deal in most books.
Well, Thursday's debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump is shaping up to be a pivotal moment in the 2024 presidential election. The House is in this week while the Senate is out. Both chambers are out next week for the July 4 holiday.
So weird. It is so weird to be talking about a presidential debate. Normally the crop tour would be over, Labor Day would be done, and then we'd be talking about a presidential debate. But no, here we go, June 27.
Well, and according to this post, it could be a pivotal moment, Chip. Senators Chuck Grassley and Roger Marshall are pressing the Biden administration on the steps it's taking to address the recent surge of used cooking oil imports. They point out concerns by some in the renewable fuels industry that large amounts of imported used cooking oil may be a blend of used cooking oil with virgin vegetable oils such as palm oil, which is directly linked to deforestation in Southeast Asia, We've talked about this a number of times, Chip.
Many times on the show, and I'm glad to see that it's getting the attention that it needs. Now we'll talk with Geoff about that more in just a couple of minutes.
Well, Chip, House GOP leaders have outlined an ambitious schedule for passing their version of the fiscal year 2025 spending bills. They aim to have all 12 annual bills out of the Appropriations Committee by mid-July and through the House by the start of the August recess, Chip. Over to you.
Way. No way. It just is laughable when they say things like this now.
Well, in other news, provisional EU duties of up to 38.1% on imported Chinese-made electric vehicles are set to start July 4, while the bloc investigates what it says are excessive and unfair subsidies. Beijing has repeatedly called on the EU to cancel its tariffs, expressing a willingness to negotiate. Both sides, indeed, have agreed to hold new trade talks.
The EU and the U.S. The EU and the U.S. are both looking at these duties on Chinese-made EVs. There's something to it.
Yep. Well, China is further restricting fertilizer exports as it seeks to contain domestic prices, cut farming costs, and bolster grain security. Curbs imposed earlier this month apply to urea and phosphates. And just one more, the Iowa Department of Ag announced the detection of bird flu in 2 more dairies in Sioux County, the 11th outbreaks in the state. Chip.
Man, crazy. All right, thank you very much, Davis. Let's bring in Brett Waltz, BAMWX.com. Good morning, Brett.
Hey, good morning, Chip.
Wow, kind of quiet in the Midwest right now, but might change tonight, huh?
Yeah, it's quiet right now, but I think that we're setting the stage with some very high humidity, very high heat as we work later on into today. That's going to allow for a severe cluster of storms to develop, kind of from Minneapolis through Dubuque and out towards Madison, Wisconsin. Really concerned about damaging winds with these storms as they develop through the overnight hours tonight.
Okay. This pattern of the heavy rains in the upper Midwest, is there any sign that it's going to change?
Yeah, I think the next several days, once we get past this little storm cluster tonight, I think that there's the potential to be less active as we go throughout this week. But to be completely honest, as we go back into next week and beyond into July, I think it's going to remain pretty active as a whole. I don't see extended bouts of dry time up there where it's been so wet.
Yeah, well, we are dealing with issues in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota that are, I mean, they only happen when we can't handle the amount of water. There's some dams that are broken, towns that are flooded. It's an absolute mess. Pattern and the trends into the first half of July. What do you see, Brett?
Yeah, I think it's more of the same, unfortunately, for the Midwest in terms of that area staying active. In terms of areas further down to the south, I know you'd alluded to the southern portions of the Corn Belt being drier and some concerns down there. I do think that over the next couple of weeks and into early July, there can be some relief. I'm more concerned about kind of the far southern plains, Oklahoma, Texas, and into the Tennessee Valley for increasing dryness in July. But I do think there's more heat at play for many as we go through the early to mid part of July.
Okay. All right, Brett. I feel like we're in need of a longer conversation here before too long. We'll get you on here, okay, buddy?
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
You bet. Brett Waltz, BAMWX.com. Coming up next, Greg Peterson, Machinery Pete, right here on AgriTalk.
Machinery Pete here, folks. This segment of AgriTalk brought to you by our friends at Dakota Ag Innovations, makers of Dakota Shine, the best way I've seen to fix faded paint. Go to dakotashine.com or call 888-996-7801.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I am your host, Chip Flory. Happy Monday morning, everyone. That means it's time for our conversation with Greg Peterson, Machinery Pete. How you doing, Greg?
Hey, I'm doing well, Chip. How are you doing this Monday morning?
Doing just fine, just fine. All right, as we always started off, let's kick it off with the pick of the week. What are you looking at?
Well, pick of the week, I think let's go a little bit different direction. And we'll honor a farm equipment dealership and also maybe then an individual. So last Thursday, I had the honor. I was up in Ontario, in Thamesville, Ontario. I was invited up by my friends at Kearney Planners. Barry Kearney, I've known for many years, and 45-year anniversary celebration of their dealership. So they wanted me to come up and speak, and had a great time. There were 300 people came out, and they invited their customers to bring some of their vintage tractors, trucks, cars. So people maybe saw I tried to throw some pictures on Facebook last Thursday, and wow, what a lineup. It was unbelievable. And just a word about Barry, in this era where it's becoming really difficult to find single store dealerships because of obviously what's been happening the last 15 years. That's Barry. He's just a store there. He sells Kinsey planners for years and a few other short lines, Drago heads, but Barry got his start in 1979. He was a farmer and he was modifying planters. So he was taking old 4-row Internationals and modifying them into 7-row 21-inch that the local farmers around Chatham, Ontario needed. So that's what you got to start. Farmers loved what he was doing. He built his business and he grew it to now he's got 26 employees and just a fantastic deal. But his wife, Sandra, Chip told me when I was up there, and it was just in conversation. She wasn't talking him up or whatever, but she goes, Greg, when we sell a new planter, Barry still delivers them to the customer personally, even if it's in British Columbia. If he has to drive 5 hours or 6 hours, whatever, he wants to personally do it. And that level of personalness and connection to the customer is, I just told Barry and the crowd there, I'm like, understand what you have here, folks. This is unusual and it's special. And it was apparent his customers, they knew that and they love Barry. So it was super fun to be up there.
Good on Barry, man.
Yeah. So congrats, 45 years, Barry. Well done. Now, when I was there, I did meet a gentleman, one of his customers. His name was Bill Patterson. And I'm going to be posting a YouTube video. I did an interview with Bill, but again, they invited people to bring out their collector tractors. And Mr. Patterson, when he was a young man, he and his father were David Brown dealers in that region of Ontario. And I don't know how old Bill is. I'm guessing upper 70s, 80s. I'm terrible at guessing. But anyway, he brought out 5 David Browns, and just beautiful. One was an experimental 950 that they never produced. It had a tiling rig on the back. It was unbelievable. To watch for the YouTube video on that, folks. But when I was looking at his collection of David Browns, and he drove in, and Bill was driving an Aston Martin. Now, I'm not a car guy, but even I know that that's like the James Bond car, right? And also, I think your producer, Big Joe, knows that those Aston Martins, the models, DB, this was a DB7, 97 model. The DB stands for David Brown.
David Brown.
Now, David Brown, I don't know if listeners know the deep history, he's from England, and David Brown's dad apparently was one of the guys that built the cogs or gears, yes. The big, huge wooden gears that powered the textile mills back to make England industrial power. And his son, David Brown, was, of course, helped make modifications to warplanes and helped England win the war and made tractors, of course, David Brown tractors. So anyway, hearing Bill talk about these tractors was amazing. But the Aston Martin, I was talking to Bill about that, and I'm like, tell me about your car. So he tells me, and then he goes, you remember Greg, do you remember the movie, James Bond movie, Goldfinger? And I'm like, yeah, I have it memorized, as a matter of fact. And he said that car, he said, when that movie came out, the production company, Ian Fleming or whoever the director was, they went to David Brown or Aston Martin, and they're like, who can make this car with these gizmos? And David Brown goes, we got it. So he goes back to his engineers on the Aston Martin side, and the car engineers are going, well, we can't do that. So he went to the young farm boy engineers with David Brown, and he said, hey, you guys know about hydraulics and all this stuff. we need to soup up this Aston Martin for this James Bond movie. And they're like,
Get
oh yeah,
out.
what do you want? And they did it. So that car, as the movie was in the theaters, whatever year, 63, 4, 5, I don't know. Joe probably knows. They go to Toronto, this big farm show, and Bill is telling me this. It's in the YouTube video. But when the show shut, because everybody wanted to get up, that's the car. That's the James Bond car from Goldfinger. And the guy whispered, and he goes, if you stick around, Bill, 30 minutes after everyone leaves, I'll let you drive it. And so he tells the story about driving the James Bond car. And it was just fascinating. And then
the people you meet, Greg.
I feel every time I I told you, Chip, every time I go to Canada, it gets better and better. I mean, it's just, I think our long winters, whatever. But Bill, it turns out when he was 26 years old, the Queen Elizabeth in 1960, they had like some kind of royal dinner at the Queen Hall or something in London to honor David Brown for his contributions to England during the war, helped modify planes, and all this stuff. So they wanted representatives from the David Brown Company around the world to be at this dinner. And it turns out young Bill Patterson was the Canadian. Hey, young Bill, you get to go to this dinner.
My gosh.
So he goes, Greg, I went out and I bought the nicest suit I could find. I get over there to London and they go, oh, sir, I'm sorry, that's not how this works. They gave him a card and they said, go here to this shop.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, everyone has to wear the exact same tux, tie, shoe, everything. Just you got to be exactly spot on. So, okay, he gets his clothes. He goes to this event, 26 years old. He says the first thing a Bobby, old cop there in England, frisks him head to toe like you've never been frisked before. He goes to the next station. He gets frisked again. He gets worked over again. What the heck's going on here? He goes to the next station. The guy goes, I can't do an English accent. What is your name, sir? He says, well, I'm Bill Patterson from Plymouth, Ontario. So he walks him to this door, opens the door, and there's a dude in bright yellow, like medieval garb, with a big staff, big heavy thing. And he goes, bonk, bonk, pounds the staff twice on the floor and goes, now entering the hall from Plymouth, Ontario, Bill Patterson. 26-year-old Bill walks in, meets all the lords in a line, gets to the end of the line. There's David Brown. And David says, Bill, you and your dad made Canada happen. Thank you for what you did.
Oh, my gosh.
And there's Queen Elizabeth, young Queen Elizabeth, 64 years ago at this dinner. And he said, Greg, it was a 7-course meal and pheasant was the main course. So there you go.
Oh my gosh. Bill.
That's my best story from last week, Chip.
That is a heck of a pick right there, Greg. That is so impressive. Every time you go to Canada, I don't know what you're bringing home with you, but I know it's going to be a good story.
I didn't have to claim it at the border, but it's a priceless story. So I would have had to pay a lot. Customs. Duty-free story, I guess. But the folks in Ontario and Manitoba and Saskatchewan, when I visit up there, they're such good people. Yeah. And they've been following for years. And I always come away with so many stories. But again, someone like Barry Carney there, 45 years in business, scratched it out. And I'll have an interview with Barry talking about how he built his business. It's just an honor to get to know those folks.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever been curious as to why one Mr. Greg Peterson, Machinery Pete, loves going to machinery auctions as much as he does, that right there is a prime example of a story of why Greg loves going to these auctions.
Well, and honestly, sometimes I feel bad when I leave these auctions and events because I wasn't able to talk to everybody because what I'm finding is that we all have our stories, whether it's about a tractor, our farms, our grandpas, whatever. And it's just an honor to hear them.
Man, I tell you what. You know what? Next week we'll get back to talking about equipment prices, okay? But that was fantastic. Partner. Thank you, my friend. What a story. Thanks, Greg. Greg Peterson. Machinery Pete. We'll be back with Geoff Cooper from RFA next here on AgriTalk.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
Joining us now, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady. Beej, corn's moderately lower, I'll call it. It's off the lows, but still moderately lower. What's going on?
Yeah, so corn and wheat, I'm going to lump those together because just a continuation of this recent sell-off that we've had here. So breaking down technically, there's just no real fundamental support behind the market right now, and funds are sellers. So it's, like I said, just a continuation. 5 to 6 cents lower in corn, 5 to 9 cents lower in SRW wheat, and that's leading that complex. The other HRW and HRS futures aren't quite that much lower.
All right, some mixed trade in soybeans, higher in soybean meal and lower in bean oil. More of the same there?
Yeah, absolutely. So spreading action in the product markets, like you mentioned, and soybeans are trading along with soy meal to the upside so far this morning. We'll kind of see, but the selling interest in soy oil is somewhat limiting buyer interest in soybeans.
All right, very good. Cash market, hard to ignore what's going on in the cattle trade, isn't it?
It is, and still waiting on the average cash price, the official average cash price from USDA. That'll come out here later this morning. But the cattle on feed report, not a whole lot there. No real major surprises by any means. Just a fractionally lower on the feedlot inventory as of June 1, and we started with a weaker tone in both live cattle and feeders this morning, but we're seeing buyer interest build, and now strong gains in the front end of both of those markets.
Yeah, and then over in the hog trade, more pressure there.
Yeah, absolutely. More of the same, and just breaking down technically, cash fundamentals are starting to weaken, and so you got a multitude of factors weighing on hog futures this morning.
Good stuff. Thank you, Brian. That is Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady on Markets Now.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. The best talkers in ag, including you. Join the conversation on AgriTalk. Call us at 855-4TALK-AG.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad that you're with us on this Monday morning. Geoff Cooper is the president and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, and he joins us right now. Geoff, how are you?
I'm great, Chip. How are you this morning?
Good. We've got a lot of issues that we need to get to, but let's ease into it. Give me your reaction to the Iowa Corn 350 powered by ethanol.
Hey, it sounds like a great event. I wish I could have been there. I saw lots of pictures and heard lots of fantastic feedback from the event. We had a couple staff folks who were able to join. Yeah. Love seeing that, and what an amazing day, and congratulations to Iowa Corn on a successful event.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that. Congratulations as well. But what a stage to put ethanol on. Yeah,
it really is. You don't get many opportunities like that to reach the masses in that sort of way and that sort of stage and forum. So to see ethanol and this nation's corn growers really showcased and given that kind of prominent spotlight for a day is that's a really cool thing to see.
It really is. Okay. Tell me about the action that was taken last week by RFA and the National Farmers Union. As a matter of fact, it's one of two separate cases against EPA regarding its tailpipe emissions rules. What's the effort here?
Yeah, and there's actually several more lawsuits that have been filed now, too. I think there are up to 8 lawsuits that have been filed against EPA over the agency's tailpipe emissions standards. And so EPA several months ago finalized their standards for 2027 through 2032. And we took a hard look at the regulation that they finalized and have some serious concerns with it, Chip, because it effectively serves as a mandate forcing the production of battery electric vehicles and would really reduce the production and availability of liquid fueled vehicles with internal combustion engines. And as liquid fuel producers, we're very concerned about that. especially because the premise or really the basis of these entire regulations is completely flawed when it comes to carbon accounting. And you've heard me say several times, we share this administration's goal of reducing emissions from our cars and trucks. And yes, we believe EVs will probably have a role to play in doing that, but we're strongly opposed to the way EPA has structured this regulation. We don't think Congress ever gave the agency the authority to mandate EVs. They don't have the authority to just cherry pick just tailpipe emissions. And so, we decided our best course of action was to challenge this regulation in court. We tried to settle this and work with EPA outside of the court system and through the rulemaking process and everything, but they really didn't pay much attention to our comments. So we felt like this was sort of our last resort.
Focusing on the tailpipe only, it is a very narrow focus. There's no question, because when you take into consideration everything, all the energy, all the rare earth minerals that are needed to create these EVs, I mean, it's still an ongoing debate over which one is environmentally better, right?
That's right. That's right. And that's our biggest overarching concern with this regulation is EPA is pretending that electric vehicles don't have any emissions impacts.
Right.
They're treating EVs as, quote unquote, zero emissions vehicles, even though we know there are substantial emissions related to the production of electricity at the power plant, emissions related to the mining and refining of those critical minerals and the other materials that go into these vehicles. And so why is it fair that corn ethanol is evaluated based on this full supply chain kind of big picture life cycle analysis, but then when we're talking about EVs, we're only focusing on the tailpipe? And guess what? They don't even have a tailpipe. And so EPA just assumes no tailpipe, no emissions. And that's really the crux of the issue here.
Can you imagine if there was a GREET model requirement on EVs?
Yeah, exactly. And there should be. And that's really what we've been advocating, Chip, is let's look at all technologies, all vehicles, all fuels on a level playing field. Let's use the GREET model to evaluate those emissions impacts, because guess what? The model has electric vehicle pathways in it already. And let's compare the impacts of these vehicles and fuels on an apples to apples basis. And if we were doing that, you would see that renewable fuels like ethanol compete very effectively and in some cases outcompete electric vehicles when it comes to carbon performance.
Okay. All right. What's the next step with this case?
Well, so right now the DC Circuit Court of Appeals is looking at all the lawsuits that came in, kind of figured out who all is challenging this thing. The next step will be for all of those parties to really lay out their issues, the concerns with the regulation. And so that'll be done through what's called a statement of issues. And that's where the real meat and potatoes comes out, and briefs are filed with the court. And then at some point after that, they'll schedule oral arguments where EPA has a chance to come in and defend itself. We'll also have a chance to raise our arguments in front of the judges. And then, several months later, we would expect a ruling. And then, depending on how that goes, there's also always the appeals process too.
Yeah. For those listening, do not expect this to be over by the end of summer.
That's right. And I frankly don't expect it to be done before the elections. I think this is something that we're probably looking, very late this year, early next year before we'd have a decision.
Okay. Explain fraudulent used cooking oil. What is it, and the potential impacts on the developing SAF markets?
Well, it has implications that go far beyond SAF, Chip. What we are seeing and hearing is really concerning to us. There's just a tidal wave of what's called used cooking oil being imported into the United States today to serve as a feedstock for renewable diesel and biodiesel and sustainable aviation fuel. But the real concern is that this stuff isn't used cooking oil at all. and that there's a high likelihood that most of this stuff or much of this stuff is actually virgin palm oil from Southeast Asia that may be blended with small amounts of used cooking oil and then shipped into the U.S., where it gets a very low carbon intensity score, where it's treated like a waste feedstock. And so it gets preferential treatment under the RFS, under the California LCFS. And at the same time, that product, that feedstock, is backing out feedstocks that are produced legitimately here in the United States, like soybean oil, but also the distiller's corn oil that all the ethanol plants are producing. So it is having negative impacts on our marketplace. It's also affecting the RIN markets. It's pulling all the RIN values down. And so we were happy to see last week a group of senators send a letter over to the administration urging them to take a really close look at this and put the brakes on these imports until we have a better handle on what's really going on here.
And if they're putting pressure on the RINs, the renewable identification number values, what that is doing is effectively reducing the incentives to blend.
Exactly.
Well, to use ethanol.
Exactly. And think about it. I mean, it's common sense. If you've got all this used cooking oil coming in, and most of it's coming from China, by the way, and being made into renewable diesel, well, that is displacing and reducing the need to use more ethanol in our transportation fuel system to meet the renewable fuel standards. So
because what they'll do is just buy the cheap RINs and submit those cheaply purchased RINs instead of actually blending ethanol into the fuel supply. It's a mess.
That's right. And the used cooking oil is not only is it a very low carbon intensity feedstock according to these agencies, but it's very low cost. And so you've got cheap, low carbon feedstock coming in, even though there's a lot of suspicion out there that this stuff is not really what it is advertised to be. And that's a big concern.
Right. Okay. We had Secretary Vilsack on the show last week, asked him about the Brazilian tariffs on imports of U.S. ethanol. I'm not sure if we got a really solid answer from him on what should be done regarding the Brazilian tariffs in particular, but what do you want to see?
Well, I mean, our ultimate goal is for them to take that tariff down. I mean, that's what we have been working with the Brazilian government on for the last several years, is just zero it out. There's been an exemption for that tariff in the past. Let's just go back to that. We have free and fair. We have had free and fair trade between our two nations in ethanol in the past, and it's worked quite well for both countries. Right now, Brazilian ethanol is flowing freely into the U.S. without any kind of tariff, any kind of barrier. We would hate to resort to this, but if they're not going to take their tariff down, we need to start thinking about putting up some equivalent barrier to their product coming into the U.S. market.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not an easy effort to keep the optics right on this, because it would truly be a retaliatory effort. But because some of that sugarcane-based ethanol has made its way into the Southeast for inclusion in the ethanol to jet program down there, with LanzaJet, it's going to be hard to keep the optics. Oh man, we're out of time. Hard to keep the optics right on this, won't it?
It is. It's a tough situation, but we have got to get a handle on it really quickly.
That's exactly right, Geoff. Man, we appreciate it each and every time we get you on here. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chip. Have a great one.
You bet. Geoff Cooper, President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association. Davis and I will be right back.
AgriTalk is brought to you by Atticus, providing battle-tested chemistries you know and trust. And welcome back to AgriTalk, everyone. Your pal Davis Michelson here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on a Monday morning. How about you, Chip Flory? Huh? Oh, well, it appears we may have lost Mr.
I think we did.
Chip Flory. Joe, are you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this week? To start? First thing?
More or less. Oh, there he is on. Hey, let me bring Chip in. He's joining us.
All right, let's give that a shot. We have a caller. Go ahead, caller. Still struggling with the connection line there. Well, We should probably talk about the weather until Chip gets here. Some comments from Brett Waltz.
I think I'm here.
You think so? I think so too.
I think I might be. I'm here one way or another.
You are here some way. Yes, we're glad to have you. So the high heat and the humidity. I mean, it's going to crack. Yeah. It's going to turn into some storms, as it often does. But it sounds like once we get through that little round, like late today, we may have a little bit of relief, at least for the remainder of the week there. Is that how you heard it too, Chip?
Yeah, that's exactly how I heard the relief. Good grief. You look at what's going on up there in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa, northwest Iowa in particular. Dude, did you see the flooding in Spencer and Rock Rapids? And
yeah, that's terrible.
On down the line up there. It's unbelievable how much damage has been done. I don't know exactly how much crop damage has been done, but think about all the low-lying areas. Think about all the holes that are going to be in this crop, in corn crop and bean crop. How many holes are going to be in those crops this year? It's going to be really difficult to try to figure out exactly what it means for corn and soybean production in that part of the world. But we do know this from the past. When you lose those low spots basically in each and every field out there, it's got to have an impact on your total production. It just, so in other words, a 250 bushel per acre cornfield becomes a 200 bushel cornfield because you've got 10% of it that is zeroed out rather than producing anything. And it's just going to be tough to get a good solid read on what that's going to mean through the end of the year.
Yeah. A good talk with Machinery Pete, but I do want to make sure that we get to Geoff Cooper's comments because I had a story. This comes from Friday. The U.S. ethanol industry facing a renewed 18% tariff going into Brazil, plans to appeal its failed case with Brazil's economic ministry directly to Brazil's president. Failing that, it could seek U.S. retaliation. I think about tariffs and how it's cheaper for us, for SAF, to bring in, or maybe not cheaper, but more climate friendly for us to bring in Brazilian feedstocks for SAF. Now we're talking about EVs that don't even have a tailpipe, so they must be clean.
Right.
Dude, some of the stuff, my head's going to explode.
They don't have
I can't handle it.
Yeah, and the thing is, they don't even have to answer the questions that corn has to answer through the GREET model evaluation leading up to it. So corn's got to account for acres that might be changed up in Brazil, okay, while the electric vehicle doesn't have to answer any of that. As far as I know, the EVs don't have to answer any of those kinds of questions. It's just, like you said, Davis, they don't have a tailpipe, therefore there are no tailpipe emissions. There's that happening, and then there's this happening as well. Okay? This just seems so ridiculous to me. What's one of the, if not the cleanest source of electric energy? It's nuclear, right?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Nuclear energy is the cheapest. France gets like 85% of its electricity from nuclear. It's that is making a commitment to reducing emissions. If you're getting that much of your electrical supply, yet they're not putting air conditioners in the Olympic dormitories Yeah, they're not putting air conditioning in the Olympic dormitories for the Paris Olympics because they want to reduce GHGs.
Wow.
Even though it's the cleanest form of energy that they've got,
Yeah.
that the world has really got when it comes to producing electricity. So you know what the U.S. answer is to that?
Oh, no.
They're bringing a crap ton of window units. Yeah, they are. You know, guys, just a shout out to the Olympic Committee. You know, keep the athletes comfortable, give them the ability to recover and to perform at their peak. Yeah. All right, I love that. But for gosh sakes, don't forget the European adapters.
Oh, wouldn't that just be it? Yeah.
Yeah, get all the way over there, go to plug the thing in, and then not be able to plug it in. Don't forget the adapters, guys.
Yeah, half the athletes electrocute themselves trying to just plug bare wires right in there.
Bare wires?
It's not good. I wonder, are they going to make these
hope none of them are listening to it. Yeah.
I hope, in seriousness, I hope they're all right. Yeah. Don't fiddle around with electricity. I wonder if they can just carry those on. Is it like a carry-on style air conditioner maybe that they just bring with them on the plane?
I got a feeling FedEx is going to use petroleum to fly them over there.
And the carbon score is ruined.
Again. It's unbelievable the way some of this stuff goes down, dude, isn't it? But you are exactly right in bringing it up. The EV needs to go through the same kind of rules and regulations as corn-based ethanol and all the other renewable fuels. Thanks for listening this morning. We got Darren Fry from Water Street Solutions this afternoon, and tomorrow morning right here on AgriTalk, Ernie Goss from Creighton University.